home, thank you for signing on. We're glad to have you as part of our audience. My name is Al Walters. I'm the president of the museum. This is a Thursday brown bag lunch. So if you brought your lunch, feel free to eat it. If you did not bring your lunch, there is some pickings over there on the table. You can help yourself. Our presenter today is Linda Rock. We oftentimes see Linda doing her presentations in costume. Today, she's appearing as Linda Rock. The topic today is outdoor fun in Elgin down through the years. Linda is certainly one of our favorite presenters, so you're in for a really interesting hour. Linda?
Yeah, Jim Anderson asked, well, why aren't you in costume? I said, well, I couldn't decide whether to be an elephant or a clown or what. But thank you for coming today, and all of you on Zoom also. Can you hear me all right? Okay. I started thinking about the good old days when we were able to be out and about and what it was like, what kinds of things did we do? And then I started thinking about what did Elginites do way back in the real good old days, as they say. So I started researching, and I found a lot of events in town that aren't around anymore, or that maybe are around. They do exist, but they're not very popular anymore. So I thought it would be fun. It was fun for me. I'm a geek too. So I hope you enjoy seeing some of these fun items. They're all outdoor, and they're seasonally. There are a couple of fall and winter items too, but I couldn't go past the 1950s because we'd be here for a couple of days because there's so much fun that went on in Elgin, right, Bill? Yes, a lot of fun that went on. So I will take the time at the end of the program. If you recognize any of these events and would like to share any of your memories, we'd love to hear those. And then also anything after the 50s, something memorable that you did that you can share outside, if you would share those also. I grouped them by season, as I said, but please enjoy the photos. The photos are mostly from our museum collection, and many of them you probably haven't seen before. And it's a wonderful collection. A couple of the postcards are from Jeff and my collection at home, but most of them are museum items. Most of these topics could be a whole program, and a couple of them already have been just on their own. So I'm going through these activities quickly just to give you an overview of how much fun it is to be in Elgin. It was, and how much fun it still is. Okay. Thanks. I'm going to say this ahead of time. Thanks so much to the Historical Society staff. Oh my gosh, you couldn't ask for a better staff. And I really mean that sincerely. Trish, Liz, Rebecca, Beth, thank you. Beth. Well, David, he's on my next category, but the staff, they're so helpful and so positive. And when if you need anything, they're there for you. And then the research people, and that was David, Jeff, Jerry Turnquist, and Mike Alft. Of course, a lot of his material too. So those are all people that I have to thank. All right, probably the most popular place in town for concerts. We're going to start with outdoor concert. Probably were Lord's Park and Wing Park. They're such scenic parks and just an idyllic place to listen to wonderful music. This is a bandstand in the middle of the lower lagoon in Lord's Park near the pavilion. It's of course no longer there. It was electrically lit, and the musicians had to cross that bridge to get into the pavilion to play. But can you imagine sitting out in that park listening to wonderful music? But Wing Park also had concerts. This one was probably the early 1900s. Look at how everyone's so dressed up, and it's quite a crowded event. So both of them were places to go to listen to good music. Swimming is another activity that everybody likes to do in the summertime. I'm not so sure. Can you see the top? It says the good old Fox River ? I doubt that many people chose to swim in the polluted Fox River. Okay, but they did swim at Wing Park in the Tyler Creek. It was dammed up, so there was some water to bathe in. You see, it's not very deep there. These women look like they're having just a cooling off time. First, it almost looked like a baptism, but I don't think women in their bathing suits were part of a baptism. So. This one is a cool picture. I don't know if you've seen this before. This is 1908. It's the first city pool at Wing Park. And it's actually a pool. It's a concrete tank that was built. The greatest depth was 5 feet. The tank was spring fed, so it's continually fed. The bottom of the pool was gravel and sand. Then they built a sandy beach next to it for sunbathing. So that was the first pool in Elgin at Wing Park. In 1924, a new pool was built. Now it was built with a concrete lining. So it included a bathhouse, a little more sophisticated, a bathhouse, diving boards, and city lifeguards. The city pool was segregated until the 1940s. Elgin's African-American residents were only allowed to use a stretch of rocky shore along the Fox River. So, and you can imagine that was, as I said previously, not a very good place to swim, not very comfortable, and probably pretty smelly and dirty. But this is the first pool. Now, Wing Park pool improvements were made to the pool in 1937 and then in 1976, and it was redesigned as an aquatic center in 2000. Lord's Park pool wasn't built until 1964. Now we're going to move on to baseball, and everybody loves baseball. It was very popular in Elgin too. I'm going to start with the adult teams. This was the Bluff Cities. The city teams were organized shortly after the Civil War. So we've had baseball for quite a while. The Bluff Cities were Elgin's amateur team. They were part-time players. They charged 25 cents admission, but they also earned a little money on bets, on side bets. The teams played, this team played teams from other towns. They didn't wear mitts. They played barehanded. You can see that guy in the middle where the bats are. That's the baseball. It is a hard ball, but they played without baseball mitts. The Bluff Cities in 1875 defeated Bloomington, the team, to become the state amateur champs. Charles Comiskey, know that name? Hall of Famer. He pitched part of one season with the team, with the Bluff Cities. Here's another team, the Elgin Kittens. This was in 1910. It was a Class D league, which is a professional franchise. The manager was Malachi Kitty Kittredge, former Chicago National League pitcher or catcher. So these guys that came to town were no sloughs. The team had adopted the nickname Kittens in his honor. The record was 35 wins and 19 losses. The Northern Association folded due to the poor attendance and the cost of traveling. But the Kittens were given the pennant anyway in July. They played at Trout Park. The Elgin Pirates in 1915, they were part of a bi-state league that included Aurora, Streator, Freeport, Ottawa, and Racine. The games were played at the southwest corner of Wing Park Boulevard and Wing Street. The Pirates were also referred to as watchmakers by the Daily News. They had two names. Their record was 26 wins, 23 losses, when that league dissolved in July. The contractors of the ballpark didn't get paid, and the management was 1 month behind in paying their players. So evidently baseball was not a very lucrative business to be in. Now in 1920, an exhibition game with the St. Louis Cardinals and the Elgin American League team played in Lord's Park. Rogers Hornsby was the biggest attraction, who was later inducted into the Hall of Fame. And the Elgin West Ends in 1937, they were the district champs. They ended up in the Illinois State Semi-Pro Championship. So we had quite a few semi-pro teams here. This is Elgin Tournament Park. In 1936, the first Illinois semi-pro championship games were held here in Elgin. And the park was before 1938. It was in 1936, but it was lit by 52 bulbs. Each of them were 1,000 watts, and they were mounted on 8 70-foot poles. So it was a nighttime game before the Cubs even. The seating capacity in 1938 was 2,700. Now, those semi-pro championship was held annually here in Elgin from 1936 to 1972. This park was on McLean Boulevard, you know where the Elgin Mall is by Route 20, that area. Then it moved to Wing Park, and a lot of these ballparks moved around. It just kind of where the space was or where they could go. In 1936, Satchel Paige, Cool Papa Bell, and Oscar Charleston, all Hall of Famers of the Negro National League All-Stars played here. They played the Elgin Semi-Pros, and they beat our team 8-1. And black players, of course, you know, were barred from Major League because of their race until 1947, but they did play some barnstorming games with interracial teams, and this was one of them. Now we're going to move on to youth baseball, which was also extremely popular in Elgin. In 1941, Earl Keeney Sr. and other merchants organized the Boys Baseball League to renew boys' interest in baseball because boys had become more interested in softball in the 1930s. This league, the Boys Baseball League, disbanded in 1946, so it only lasted 5 years, but it was succeeded then by the Elgin Little League. First tryouts for Elgin Little League were held in April of 1951. In 1953, a second league was formed, and that was the American League. The first diamond was on Route 58, Gulf Road, but after neighbor complaints, the games were moved to Wing and Channing Parks. Why would they complain? I don't know. Now, many teams added girls to their league also, but that didn't happen until the 70s or 80s. And the girls were only played softball. They didn't play baseball. But I know this is past the 1950s, but I just had to put this in here because on a side note, in 1975, the Elgin National All-Star Girls took second place at the divisional in their first year of competition. So they were good too. There were several leagues in town, which was, again, a sign of popularity of baseball. The Elgin National League, which I mentioned, started in 1951. That was the oldest. In 1959, they took the state boys title. Then they added T-ball. Here's a boy. Can you see the T? Just barely there. Yeah, they added T-ball later and added girls teams also. They played at Summit and Hiawatha at the Diamonds, which are still there. The Elgin American League, chartered in 1953. They took third place at a state tournament in the 60s, 1965. And then after the 1950s, there were 3 more leagues that were created. The Elgin Continental Little League, which started in the 1960s. They played on the Diamonds south behind the State Highway Department. Am I not? Okay. Behind and those diamonds are still there. There was a VFW Elgin Teener League. They won the Babe Ruth Series in Manchester, New Hampshire in 82-83, and the American Legion League, which was also in 1970. So Elgin took district, regional, and state titles. They all came home to Elgin between the 1950s and the 1980s. And of course, the high school teams also played baseball. Let's go to the zoo, and we can even do that today. Actually, in 1895, the zoo was added to Lord's Park. The first animals were bears, deer, and goats. And look at these visitors all dressed up, just strolling along. They have their parasols and just look so calm and comforting there because the bears were in cages. Here are the bears. But over the years, more than 45 animals have been part of the zoo, including bison, which we still have, bears, elk and deer, which we still have, coyotes, foxes, monkeys, raccoons, a wildcat, peacocks strolling around, eagles, and anyone remember the snake pit or Lord's Park? Now those came later. Yeah. The zoo did close later in 2008 for lack of funds, but it was reopened in 2013, and it's open, as I said, today. And you're welcome now. We have farm animals. There's no Lord Spark, sorry, no bears, but farm animals are there. Picnics. Who doesn't love a picnic? That's a fun outdoor activity. It could be anywhere, and there were many of them in Wing Park, Lord's Park, and Trout Park. Those were very popular places. This is a turn of the century photo. They're on the riverbank. I'm not sure where. I don't know what those buildings are, but look at the ladies are dressed up. Of course, they would be, right? I don't know if you recognize Central Park. It's next to the Fox River on Route 31 off the railroad line by the mansions by Oakcrest. The building is no longer there. It's a little steep, I think, for a picnic, but there is a park bench there, and then the building is there, just right along the river there and the railroad tracks. And there have been recent plans to clean it up so that people can actually go there again. But as I said, the building is not there. Tennis was a popular sport. Can you find the watch factory in that photo? You see it? And then the National House. There were courts around town. This one was for the ladies athletic club, which would have been part of the National House, I believe. It looks like early 1900s based on their tennis outfits. In 1914, Wing Park, courts were laid out, and Elgin Academy had courts. And I'm sure there were other places too that had tennis courts for outdoor fun. And the circus. During the pre-Civil War era, General Tom Thumb came to Elgin with the Phineas T. Barnum Show. It was pre-Civil War. In 1897, Barnum and Bailey came to town. Now, this was no small circus. There were 68 cars on 3 special trains. The tent seating was 14,000. It was a 3-ring circus, 2 stages, an arena, and a racetrack. There were high dive acts, wild animals, elephants, a gorilla, a mandrill, aerialists, and human oddities. They called them something different, but not politically correct. But there were humans there too. The admission was 50 cents. This poster is probably from the 1930s. It says McLean and Grimes Street, and David and Jeff have been looking for Grimes Street, and they don't think there is a Grimes Street, right? That it's probably was a road to the Grimes family farm. But it was also out where the Tournament Park was, near the Elgin Mall, south of Larkin Avenue, out that direction. That must have been a wide open space. I love this photo. This is actually a photo on Douglas Avenue. Often 2 circus parades would come per summer to drum up business to the circus. They'd parade downtown. They'd go through residential streets from the show grounds to the business district. I would hate to be the street cleaner that day, but this is 1935, there were several circuses in town, but this was the last big circus in town. There was Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey combined. The Great Wallenda was there and on the high wire, and Hugo and Maria were shot from a cannon. This circus was held on Shoe Factory Road. Street fairs. Elgin had 2 main street fairs. You go back as early as 1901 when Elgin Street Fair Association organized a 6-day fair, and this was to benefit Larkin Home for Children. Mostly the street fairs were obviously on streets, but they also had some shows on vacant lots too, and booths were set up. This is the 1901 fair, looking west on Chicago Street from Spring Street. It included a big Ferris wheel on DuPage Street. Jolly Low Grimes, 742-pound gentleman was there. I think it was a gentleman. Mademoiselle La Paloma went up in a balloon and came down by parachute. There was dagger throwing, and a queen of the carnival was chosen by popular vote. Now, the next year, 1902, the Elks hosted a street fair. This was a 6-day event. This was held in August. This is a photo on River Street, which is now North Grove, just north of Fountain Square. It had very similar activities. There were soft drink stands, souvenir shops, a cane racks, and another Ferris wheel, a giant swing. A camel, though, this was an addition. A camel gave rides down Grove Avenue and up Spring Street. And 50 feet above the street was a high wire where Daredevil Grant on his bicycle would juggle electric lighted clubs at night. Concerts were also then given in Fountain Square by the Watch Factory Elgin Military Band. Chautauqua. Chautauqua were traveling tent shows that came to towns and small cities, including Elgin. Families would camp in tents around the main tent and dining hall, and the group combined education, entertainment, moral lectures, and temperance advocacy, and it tended to slant to a religious bent. They featured music, lectures, sermons, Bible study, and comic monologues, which I don't know how that fits into it, but there were. Performances were held mornings and evenings, anywhere from 7 to 14 days. This one is not an Elgin picture because I couldn't find any Elginites at Chautauqua, but it was held. Chautauqua was held in Elgin 10 times in 1905 and 14 times in 1912. Most of these were camped near the northeast end of town by the Fox River. One was held on the Elgin Academy grounds right here, and one was in the Lord's Park. So that was a popular event in Elgin. There were 2 famous speakers from Chautauqua that came to Elgin in 1905, William Jennings Bryan, and in 1909, Carrie Nation. Did you know that the Kane County Fair was in Elgin? How many of you knew that? Okay, all right. Well, most people don't, right? The first fair was in 1936, and it was called the Northern Illinois Junior Fair and Agricultural Exposition. Whew. It was held in August in an old racetrack enclosure at Wing Park. That was in 1936. In 1937 to 42, there was a second fair. It was called the Elgin Agricultural Fair. It was held at Maroon Field, the Elgin High School football field, which is now Drake Field. And then this one is a photo at Wing Park, a 1953 photo. These photos, by the way, are from the Elgin Courier News negatives. Oh, they're wonderful. If you ever have days to spend up in research, you would enjoy seeing these. This is proof that there was a fair. You wouldn't have a banner without proof, right? There, in 1946, the fair moved back. Well, first of all, 1943 to 45, there was no fair. That would make sense, right? In 1946, the fair moved back from Maroon Field. It went to Wing Park at the former racetrack area. And now the fair had several names. It had the name Agricultural Fair, Farm Fair, or finally, Kane County Fair got that name. In 1947, it moved back to Maroon Field while improvements were made in Wing Park. This is a photo from newspaper clipping in our collection taken at Maroon Field. And hopefully the girls, prize heifers are being inspected. That's 1947. Here's another, and these items are up here for you. You're welcome to look at. Another souvenir from the fair. So from 1948 to 1954, then the county fair was located at the improved site at Wing Park. And then in 1955, it moved to St. Charles, and it's been there ever since. This is a park, Trout Park, worth mentioning separately. It was opened in the 1870s. It was a park. Do you know where this is? Yeah, near the Northwestern tracks. It's still there. Cottages were built along the Fox River there. built by Chicagoans and other out-of-towners, and they would come along, come and stay on weekends along the Fox River to cool off, right? Do you remember Trails and Treasures? Yeah, and those cottages were, those stores were the cottages, and Al's had a restaurant there. That's all gone now, but that's where the cottages were. The park, Trout Park, had a beer garden, picnic area. Groups from Chicago would come by rail, groups like union groups or fraternal organizations or Sunday school groups would come, and they'd come by rail and they'd party in the park. But neighbors complained of frequent disturbances, and I have to speculate that it probably wasn't the Sunday school groups that were causing the commotions, but neighbors did complain. Also in 1933, a tornado damaged the botanical garden that was there. Now, in May of 1909, in Trout Park, an amusement park was opened. The big attraction was this guy, the big circle dip roller coaster. It also, the amusement park also had a circle swing, a carousel, steel boats, and a mini railway. Now, the roller coaster was only open 1 year. The whole amusement park suffered financial woes, and by World War I, the amusement park was gone. The park still there, but no roller coaster. Did you know Elgin had harness racing? Did you know that? You did. Organized racing began on the fairgrounds of the Elgin Agricultural Society, which was 42 acres east of Hill Street at Enterprise in Columbia. So this direction, up north, north and east, from 1870 to 1881. It was a 1 mile track, and trotters and pacers raced there. Now, in 1889, the Elgin Driving Park Association opened this track, and it operated from 1889 to 1893. This is an 1892 section of the map. That street that's not the north there, north of Elgin Nurseries, that's Bent Street. Liberty Street runs along the left side there. And I don't know if you can see Villa in the top corner, Villa Street, kind of give you an idea where it was. This was open until, or operated until 1893. And then in 1907, the Gentlemen's Driving Club developed a 1/2 mile track for harness racing in Wing Park. And that operated in Wing Park until 1920. There also was horse racing in the winter. This was in the 1880s on the Fox River. That would have been fun to see. How about dog racing? In 1927, a greyhound track with a grandstand was on McLean Boulevard. This is where that Turner Park was. 1928, the complex went into foreclosure, so it only lasted a year. There were 8 races that were held in the evenings, Monday through Saturday. There was a mysterious fire after 1928. In 1929, it was reconditioned, but the state's attorney refused to permit gambling, so obviously it closed. We all know about the road races. I won't spend a lot of time, except that that was a huge outside event in Elgin, and people from all over came from 1910 to 1915, 1919, 1920, and 1933. Thousands of spectators came. The first 6 years, there were 2 days of racing, and it was a 305-mile race. The track was on existing roads, as we know, on the west side. The finish line had a scoreboard, and Grandstand Place, off of Larkin Avenue, that's where the grandstands were and where the scoreboards were. The individual cars started at 30-second intervals, so you really didn't know who was winning until everybody was done racing. Interest did decline when brick speedways replaced the dirt races. So the 1933 race was an attempt to try to bring it back, and it just didn't quite work. But in 1913, 4th of July, America's first sanctioned motorcycle race was held in Elgin. It was only held that 1 year. It was an 8.5-mile course, and they used part of the road race course. The winner rode an Indian motorcycle. I don't know motorcycles, but when you watch those shows of antiques, Indians seem to be a good motorcycle, right? Yeah. They averaged 55.4 miles per hour on a gravel track. So that would have been kind of dangerous. I love this. Maybe some of you remember the Pushmobiles, right? And the Soapbox Derby. In 1910, it started out as an informal event inspired by the road races. Kids designed and built their own motorless cars. They used coffee mill wheels. Can you see those? They often used wheels from the Woodruff and Edwards foundry. They used old other wagon wheels and rope and soapboxes or old crates to put together a car. It was called a pushmobile because it had to be pushed when it was on a flat surface, or if you were on downhill, it was just gravity. I could imagine as a mother, I might be a little afraid with these kids, but the races were held from 1910 to 1917 for these kids. Then in 1934, Ed Scholl and Mike Danilek made a course near Danilek's home. It was a 4-block loop. It started on Lincoln Avenue, and it looped around the neighborhood streets around Douglas, Spring, and Slade, just around. It was fairly level, so you needed a pusher. Races were held in the late summer and in the early fall. And this race had 52 drivers and more than 3,000 spectators. Can you imagine that in the neighborhood? Yeah. In 1935, it switched from pushmobiles to downhill racing. Pushers weren't needed because the course then was pretty much held on hills. And the course moved around town. It was in several places from 1937 to 1942. Now, this was not affiliated with the National Soapbox Derby. Local races did resume in 1950 and in 1951 that were sponsored by the Elgin Exchange Club. Not to leave the girls out, we have a doll derby in 1951. There was a parade that was held, and this went on for several years. I don't know when it ended. This is a 1958 photo, though. 70 girls paraded in this one with decorated doll buggies, and prizes were awarded for the most humorous, the prettiest, the most original, the patriotic, and the characterization category. And it continued for several years. I bet some of those girls would have liked to have been in one of those pushmobiles. In 1952, the first sanctioned all-American soapbox derby was held in Elgin. It was limited to boys, 11 to 15 years old. And girls actually started racing in 1971. There were rules regulating the size of the car, the weight, how it was constructed, the cost. And I selected this picture because I love this. One of the rules, parental advice only was allowed. No help in building it was allowed. Kind of like the science fair projects, yeah. He does, yes. He's posing though. The last race was in 1959 on National Street. Those must have been fun to go to and participate in. This is another outside activity that you certainly know about, the Song of Hiawatha Pageant. From 1927 to 1979, one of the longest run pageants in America. It was outdoors at Camp Big Timber under the direction of Boy Scout Executive Carl Parlaska, or Parr as he was known. The 50th performance had more than 9,000 attendees. It was based on Longfellow's poem. Only boys performed, except Mrs. Parr playing Nokomis, until the Quonashi dancers were added in 1948. The cast and crew grew to more than 500. Took up to 3 years of study and practice to become a Big Timber dancer. Now, unrelated to Parr's pageant, there was a performance before then, a pageant produced in Lord's Park, the Song of Hiawatha. It was produced in the Lower Lagoon, July 4th, 1916. It was directed by Minna Brady McGann, and it was to benefit Sherman Hospital. So we don't always know about that one, but that was before Parr's. Oh, the Wild West shows. Oh, gosh. 1896, the first one came to Elgin. The shows were quite distorted legends of frontier days, characterizing Indians, of course, as the bad guys. And they're staged to hold up a deadwood and a rescue of settlers. And I don't know if you've seen some of the movies. I'm trying to think the Annie Oakley movie. You get to see some of those staged events. They're kind of fun. This one, the first one, had 3 trains worth of paraphernalia, 39 cars that brought this first one to town. It included a herd of buffaloes, or bison as we know them, and about 400 horses. There were other Wild West shows also that came to Elgin in the early 1900s. Not every year, but from 1901 to 1925, there were quite a few. Then the Wild West shows tended to fade out before World War I, and some circuses did include frontier acts with their shows, but the actual Wild West traveling show faded out. Now, this is a program, we have it up here. This is in Jeff and my collection from 1908. You can see at the bottom advertising the show, and this is Buffalo Bill. And this is, I don't know if this is the one, but Annie Oakley actually did come to Elgin and appeared in the show. The big tent was set up in Driving Park, again, where the harness races were. And the estimated attendance at this show was 8,000 in the afternoon and 12,000 in the evening. So that was a fun outdoor activity. Who doesn't love a parade? And Elgin certainly does. Perhaps the 4th of July is one of the most popular of the parades. Some of the highlights of the 4th of July parades, 1866, and this is an actual photo, 1866 of the parade in Elgin. It's on the southeast corner of Chicago and Douglas here. The Goddess of Liberty was featured in the parade. 1878, the National Guard performed drill movements. Mystic Crew, I don't know if you've ever heard of that, Krewe. It was a burlesque group, and they would come to town and they would march in parades. They had comic floats, and they would satirize local people and local groups. So that was an added humorous addition to the 4th of July parade. Of course, so the Welcome Home Parade, which is pretty self-explanatory, May of 1919, to honor those who served in World War I. This is one of the Memorial Day parades. This one was in 1925, and this one was led by the Watch Factory Band. They marched up Chicago Street to Channing Cemetery. Flag Day Parade. This was 1943. Rockford's Camp Group troops marched. Over 1,500 civilians and soldiers marched in this parade. It was over a 2-mile route, about 25,000 spectators. This is a fun one too, Pet and Hobby Day Parade. This was in 1948. Prizes and ribbons were awarded to participants, and they were judged on their pets, their hobbies, their vehicles, group entries. You can see they're all kids. There were 2 groups. It was kindergarten through 4th grade group and a 5th through high school category. That looks pretty fun. Labor Day, another very popular one. This one is 1938 in the Baker's Local Parade. I picked this one out of many pictures because I like the cake. There were lots of elaborate floats that were in these clippings from 1938. The Carpenters Local this year had 81 members marching in the parade. Now, these parades for Labor Day started in the 1900s and went at least through 1952. So that was a popular one. Loyalty Day Parade, the first one was in 1951, and they were held through the late 80s, we think. Another parade, and this one, I suppose, Patriotic Parade, right? Loyalty Day. There was another parade mentioned, which I didn't find a photo of, and that was, they had a Christmas parade, at least one year, in 1952, and it was held at night. That would have been pretty cool, but a little cold, I think. Now, I have to do a shout out right here. Lisa Ebby Blazer sent an email to Trish saying that she has a home movie of a parade from 1960-61 that included Larson, Abbott, Kimball, and junior high bands. And it's like a little over a minute. It's from the home movie. And Trish said she would post it on our Facebook page, right, Trish? So you can see that. I wasn't able to get it into the program, but that's kind of fun too. Now, the Elgin Centennial, it also included a parade, but this was a big event, of course, in 1935. A lot of outside events happening. There were 3 parades during this time. Did you see the cabin there? The replica cabin was displayed at the GAR Park. The first parade had a covered wagon with descendants of early pioneers. Wouldn't that be cool? There was a ceremony in the park, an address. The Song of Elgin was performed by a high school group. A brass quartet played. There also, during the celebration, was a huge pageant called On Wings of Time, which celebrated the 100 years of progress in Elgin. Now, moving forward, not in the 50s, but in 1985, the Exposition, we also celebrated. We didn't have any big parades, but we did have fireworks. I don't know if you remember that. Here's one of the parades, the Elgin Youth Parade. We've got that banner up here. Golfing. Oh, gosh. Everybody knows about golfing in Elgin. But did you know in 1897 that Harry and L.B. Hamlin, brothers, laid out a course on gravel in the hills behind Elgin State Hospital? Did you know that? No, I didn't. But there were no putting greens though, and the white rags were tied to the sticks to mark the holes. So I guess technically you could call that a golf course. In 1901, the Elgin Country Club opened its first permanent course on 80 acres of the Weld Farm. It was west of town. And this was one of the new buildings, this clubhouse. And then in 1909, this is the biggie for Elgin. Elgin's was the first city in Illinois to establish a municipally owned public golf course. It was a 9-hole golf course. And so Liz, the golf course is here, right? On this photo, that's what it says. You have to really look to see where it is. Look for the golf ball flying, but that golf course, of course, is still around. Fishing, great thing to do in the summertime. It's been, Fox River has been a fishing spot for many years, fishing for food, but also just for fun, for relaxation. Can you imagine? Great way for boys to spend the lazy summer days along the Fox River there. In 1941, Ed Clifford, in his newspaper column, Gunshots, wrote that fishing was Elgin's #1 sport. And at that time, more than 5,000 licenses were issued yearly in 1941, at that period. Boating, cruising down the Fox River was no doubt very relaxing. Steamboat rides were also available in the 1880s and 1890s. And canoes. I was just recently looking at an article in 1921, and where canoes were mentioned on the Fox River. From 1936 to 1948, except for 2 war years, regattas were organized by the Elgin Marine Club. It was a 3-day event held on Labor Day weekend. There were 100 to 125 entries, about 200 boats from all over the United States. The first regattas were near the pumping station, and then the last 5 or 6 were just north of Kimball Street Bridge. The boats went up to speeds of more than 60 miles an hour. Whoops, there should be another one in there. There, okay. Spectators watched from the bank, and they would set up bleachers on Kimball Street Bridge for them to watch. The total attendance over those 12 years was over 100,000. So it was a really popular event, but was discontinued in 1948 because there just wasn't enough help. It got too big to handle, and there just wasn't enough help to keep it going. In 1949, there was a 3 stock boat races that were held instead. And then in the 2000s, there was an attempt to have boat races on the river, but that only lasted a year or 2. There, certainly attendance was not like it was for the regatta. Cycling, Tom Armstrong gave an excellent brown bag program last month on the history of bicycles, but I have to include that because that was a popular outside event. And there were several clubs and races in Elgin over the years, as well as just regular folks enjoying bicycles. 1890s, there were the century runs that were 100 miles completed in a day that started in Chicago. And there were 2 different routes. One went through Aurora and Elgin and back. 1894, 1896 to 1905, the Elgin Cycling Club raced on the driving park. course, not everyone participated in races. It was a popular mode of transportation too. In 1895, actually, the city council passed an ordinance prohibiting riding on sidewalks and requiring street lamp for night riding and limiting the speed limit to 12 miles an hour within the city. So there must have been quite a few bikes. This was a long-running annual event from 1926 to 1964, except for 1932. And that was a real popular road race. Many racers that were in this event went on to Pan American and Olympic titles. Now, this one was discontinued because it went into Chicago and it got too dangerous as traffic got more and more congestion. There was fear of too many accidents. Did you know, you knew we had an airport because we just had last week. I told you these topics could be a whole, right? A whole program, each one of them. This one there was an air show on May 7th, 1950 at the Elgin Airport. That one was off of 31 by the toll road. Now, there were other airports in town too. Beth Nawara gave a wonderful presentation last Thursday. The pilots at this particular show were guests from 5 different states. There were 175 planes and several thousand spectators. There were earlier air shows also. There was one in 1930, the National Air Races Derby. And in 1941, there was one, the Burnage Airport Air Show, and probably were others. There was also glider competition in September 1955. It was a 2-day event sponsored by the Glider Council. It included events such as cross country, spot landings, and length of flight. I'm moving along because I see you're getting antsy here. The horseshoes. Do anybody know anybody that used to toss horseshoes? It's an old game. Yeah. Did you do it? Did you?
Not myself.
Yeah. Okay. Did you? Okay, play in Wing Park. So they had the horseshoe set up then, right? Yeah. It was probably brought over. It's an old game, probably brought over by English settlers, and there were competitions held in September at Wing Park. This guy, Frank Lefty Breen, the city champion for 25 consecutive years, from 1931 to 1955. And he had a trick shot that I think is really pretty cool. It was called burning the stake. And he would put a match in front of the stake and he'd make a ringer, which would light the match. And then he made another ringer, which put it out. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how many horseshoe players could do that. Here he is with one of many of his trophies, his 22nd trophy. He won at least 2 National Amateur Athletic Union singles titles also. So he was just an icon. Football in the fall, it was a popular high school spectator sport, of course, which still is. This is from 1896, the Elgin High School team. They were 3-time state champs. Later, the Elgin Maroons and the Larkin Royals, this would be after the 50s, made great rivals. But the high school teams, the Elgin High School team and Elgin Academy, they actually had a football team, played their first interscholastic game in 1891. We also had a semi-pro team. The Elgin Torpedo Athletic Club played from 1947 to 1951. Most of these players were former high school students. A few of them had some college experience, but the games were played on Wednesday evenings and Saturday afternoons, so it wouldn't interfere with the high school schedule. The teams couldn't make a financial go of it, so they lost money the last 2 years, so that fizzled out. Ice skating, a big event in Elgin. Races were held in Lord's Park in 1922. This is a photo at the Lower Lagoon. The Winter Ice Carnival led to the organization of the Elgin Skating Club. And Elgin was a major center for ice skating competition. Another wonderful program could be done with this one on the Silver Skates events. Individuals skated on the lagoons, not just racing, but skated until the 1960s. And that's when the lagoon stopped freezing for various reasons. There also was a skating pond at the north end of the golf course in Wing Park, and they held ice hockey competition also. Sleigh Rides. I love this picture. This is the blizzard of 1881. We recognize our good old Maine here. Sleigh rides were very popular in Elgin from early days on. So popular that in 1888, sleigh bells were required to cut down on the number of collisions that the sleighs had. In 1917, the bobsleds were rented from livery stables for sleigh rides. Many of them started from the watch factory or from the post office, and then they'd go to St. Charles or to Dundee or Algonquin. This one, I wish I were in school here. Lowry School students were given a bobsled ride. This is from the Courier News negatives. And parks provided locations for downhill sledding, as well as streets. In fact, in 1936, 37, and 40, because of so many near accidents, the supervised sledding was planned with designated streets being barricaded off so the kids could actually sled safely. This is kids at Wing Park. All right, now these are some outdoor fun that happened after. And these just came off the top of my head and collaboration, the Foxtrot Art Showcase, a folk fair, and which morphed into the iFest. Remember the movies in Festival Park? I don't know if they still do those or not, outside movies. The AAUW sponsored the Garden Walk every 2 years. I think there's another one coming up maybe next year. Nightmare on Chicago Street, the Walkabout Theater. Have you been to that? Is that still around? I think it is too. So this is your time to share either something you remember from these previous events that I showed you, or something since the 1950s that you particularly are fond of and remember. You think of Elgin with fond memories. Yes.
This is more of a point of information. I worked at the Elgin Post Office. I've been retired for 8 years. But the strangest letter that I ever got was addressed to the last surviving lady, the Titanic. And it was Elgin, Illinois, didn't have a name. So obviously I went to our senior clerk, who was to me old and Nuremberg, and I teased him and I said, hey, somebody's looking for your girlfriend. So he looked at me and says, oh, I know who this is. And I said, really? And I guess she lived here in Elgin, and she was over off of Villa, the trailer parks. And actually that letter was addressed to us.
Well, I remember, didn't Jeff Myers do an interview with her?
Yes.
She was still alive, right, at that point. I don't know if she's living now, but yeah. Isn't that here in Elgin? Who would have thunk it, right?
Yeah, and we would get letters like that would have like corner streets.
Oh, yeah,
Somebody who lived there, I think that was the funnest I ever.
yeah. Anybody else? Any fond memories?
I have a memory that I like to point out, that bicycle road race,
Uh-huh.
only an hour long, when Elgin to Chicago.
I know, yeah.
I have a pretty advanced bike, and I can't do 45 miles in an hour.
So it starts at 1 over by 2.
It's over by 2.
Well, next day. That's what I thought at first.
Doesn't say that.
Jeff, do you know? The timing of the road race. It starts at Elgin at 1 and it ends about 2.
The
There
29th.
were a lot of cars around in
Yeah, I can
1920.
imagine.
So
I don't know. That's a very good question. Okay, I'll get right on it. David and I will get right on it. Yeah, that would be pretty fast.
Well, I found out that Elgin at one time was home to Kane County Fair when we put up the windmill in Cover Park. Gentleman who helped put us up was Frank Engel, who's a farmer in Hampton. And when we were working at Frank's farm doing the tower, he showed me a picture of him and his father. They won the Grand Champion in 49.
Wow.
For a steer.
For the steer? Uh-huh. How about that? Yeah. Yeah, very few people knew that the fair was here. Now you all know, you can spread the word. Was there another memory, Frank?
Yeah, I have been thinking about that swimming pool that's in the park for decades. And I've never seen a picture of it. It's like such a relief to see that I didn't just make this up.
You didn't make it up. You know,
It's
and
so big, but and very shallow.
very shallow. And, you know, the bottom, it wasn't really a pool, because the bottom was gravel and sand. And it was just a concrete oval, basically, and spring fed. So not the kind of pool that we think of. Actually, I'm doing some research for 100 years ago. And there was an article in July 1921, and it was one of the swimming instructors who had an editorial. She was very upset because there was somebody who'd written in the newspaper that it was a terrible pool, it was dirty and, you know, unsafe and whatever. And so she was really countering everything that this person had accused him of. But I also read in an article before that someone had to go have stitches because they jumped into the pool and they cut themselves on the bottom. So, you know, go figure. You know, the good old days, you've got to remember the good parts.
I don't remember any broken bottles.
You don't remember the broken bottles in 1908? Okay, good. Yeah, that picture probably most people haven't seen.
Is it possible to get a copy of that?
It is.
Sure.
It's neat. I like it because the boys are hanging over there.
Just an aside, we talked about Class D kitten baseball team, that's the same level as the Kane County team today, so we're going to Class A. And my favorite player on the team is a guy named Fritz Meisel, who's 1910, he's playing at Trout Park in Elgin. In 1914, he's playing in New York City for a team that became known as the Yankees. At the time, they were the Highlanders. He set the team record for stolen bases in 1914. It didn't get broken until some guy named Ricky Henderson, who's in the Hall of Fame, he broke it in like 1986. So, and there's old Fritz. He was walking the streets of Elgin, you know. So.
I just think some of those names, those Hall of Famers that were here, yeah, that's pretty amazing that they came down. Plus, Annie Oakley, goodness.
What year did you say that the Central Page was out at Wing Park for exhibition game?
13?
You said 30.
30? That's 30.
Okay. I seem to recall, you know, I grew up about half a block from the back entrance to Wing Park, so I saw a lot of games.
Oh, yeah.
Especially the semi-pros, when I saw a lot of those. It seemed like I recall that there was one game or one exhibition game that my dad took me to where Satchel Paige did pitch against.
You know,
That was
wouldn't have been
1950s.
Yeah, I was gonna say, these are just selected, doesn't mean it was the only time, so that's very, you know, very likely that some of these players and came at other times too. Yeah, if I'd had a year, maybe I could have researched from, you know, like the 4th of July parades, you know, they started and when did they end? Well, I just found selected pictures, yeah, but we just love parades in Elgin. I'm so
Well,
amazed.
Satchel was pretty old about that time.
About that,
too,
so,
but
well,
he did, I think he was there and pitched.
Okay.
An exhibition,
sure.
Born in 1906. So.
yeah.
Could be. Yeah.
Linda, maybe you said something about the glass where, yes.
This right here. This is from the Elgin Carnival, 1902. One of the items you would purchase, one of those shops.
Is it called carnival glass or is it not called?
It's called Ruby Flash. Yeah, yeah, it's just carnival because of the event, the street fair, but yeah, it's Ruby Flash. And this, and here's a pin from the carnival in 1902, the pin bag. And the Elks, this is one that the Elks sponsored, yeah. These are fun to collect, there are quite a few of them around.
So Linda, is that carnival glass is a separate?
Yeah, it's a separate type, it is a type of glass, and you buy them typically at carnival, I think they were pretty inexpensive. They have kind of that shiny.
It's like iridescent.
Iridescent.
Yeah.
And usually kind of an orange or.
Kind of an
Orange
orangey
and
one.
yellow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Where this ruby flash was very popular in the 1910s.
1980s.
1990s.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was that early.
Yeah,
just gonna say, we have a few of these ruby flashes, and one of the fun things about collecting, maybe 10 years ago, somebody in Florida had this Elgin carnival, and they mentioned that it was to a Mrs. Fred Jenks.
Oh.
Is the name, and I guess I know that name, you know, her husband owned the opera house in town, was involved in the road races, and any of the, when you see things posted, the guy who was posting the bills for various events. It's kind of freaky to have a name on a piece of something that stage is like 110 years old, and I know that.
A lot of times they'd have their name added to the back, you know, a lot of them, you know, they have the event and then you would sketch your name, that's your name on the back of them. So,
No magic marker.
no magic marker. Anybody else, you've been so patient.
Does anyone have any recollection of a rodeo pretty far east on Chicago Street on the north side? I remember going to that, I'm just gonna guess this was in like 63, 4-ish.
We have a rodeo poster at home.
A poster, but it's
Yeah.
on 58.
And this
They
was-
had a rodeo.
This is not Chicago Street, because it was near one of my parents' friends' houses.
Okay.
But they had rodeos in Elgin. So we used to be a country town.
And John Kennedy came here, Teddy Roosevelt came here. I didn't put them as outside fun, but John Kennedy was there. You know, this was, no, even though it was a country town, there were a lot of people came here. Yeah. Anybody else?
Linda,
Yes.
we have some outdoor fun from the Zoomers.
Oh, good.
Of course, the annual Elgin Cemetery Walk.
Oh.
And I did not make that up, Darlene said that. Ramona wanted to remind us of Lawrence Park concerts on Sunday afternoons, late 1990s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
Well, there's the house.
The house walk's another one.
Ramona said house walk as well.
What year did the house walk start?
Bill.
Boy. Before your time, okay?
I guess. I'd be like,
Bryan was very good.
I thought it was 86.
Okay.
I saw in the paper today where the Elgin Park band shell is gonna host the children's theater doing a production this summer.
Yes, and they're
Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah,
Rebecca,
Miller is involved in that.
she's doing all the
Staff
costumes.
member. Yeah.
I remember as a youth, as I said, I lived near Wing Park, and in the winter time, we would go. We sled down that swale there where the band shell is now. And we would have a competition sometimes. Start up at the top of the hill, and we try to go all the way across and up the little knoll that was there. But couldn't do that after they put the band shell in.
A little hard to do, yeah. Yeah, a lot of the events I showed you were more organized, you know, professional, just because that's what got press coverage and got the photos. But there were a lot of fun activities going on with the kids and families too.
One more question from Jim. Ron wanted to know what year was the first motorcycle race?
There was only one, it was 1913.
So when was the last one?
But that's.
When was the last one?
Well, that's the one. It's 1913. Yeah, I don't know why I only lasted a year, anybody know, but it was just one. Well, yes. I'm just gonna wrap it up. Okay. Thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate, as a teacher, I can, you know, kind of read the audience and, you know, you're getting more relaxed. And I think, oh, God. You were really a good, very good audience. Thank you.